Let's talk about the first sign. And I want you to really sit with this one because it's counterintuitive. When an avoidant person stays in contact during hardship, even briefly, that's not a small thing. That's not a footnote. That is the whole story compressed into a single text message. Here's what most people don't understand about avoidant attachment. It's not that these people don't feel, it's that they feel too much, too fast, and somewhere early in their life, a childhood, a first heartbreak, a home where closeness meant danger or disappointment, they learned a single brutal lesson: distance is safety. Silence is survival. If I don't reach for you, you can't leave a mark on me when you go. So understand what it costs them to send that text. You and I, when we're stressed, we might call 5 people. We might need to talk it out, process it out loud, feel held. That's our nervous system strategy. But the avoidant nervous system runs the opposite program. Under stress, every wire in their body is screaming, retreat, go dark, handle it alone. That is the default setting. That is 30 years of neural pathways firing in one direction. So when they override that, when they still send you that one small message that, hey, rough day, or that meme with no explanation, you're not looking at a small gesture. You're looking at an act of will. You are looking at somebody consciously overriding a survival instinct in real time for you. This is the difference between intensity and consistency that I talk about all the time. Intensity is easy. Intensity is the love letter, the grand gesture, the flowers on the first date. Anybody can do intensity once. Consistency, showing up in the small, unglamorous moment when every part of you wants to disappear. That is character. That is where truth lives. And for an avoidant person, staying in contact during hardship, even briefly, is their consistency. It just doesn't look like yours. It doesn't look like a 2-hour phone call. It looks like 3 words at 11 at night. And this is the mistake I see people make over and over. They measure someone else's love using their own instrument. You measure love in volume. They express it in restraint. You're waiting for the flood, and they're handing you a single drop of water in the desert, and you're walking right past it because you didn't recognize it as rain. Now, here's the deeper truth underneath all of this, and I want you to really hear it. Avoidance is not the absence of attachment, it's attachment wearing armor. The armor is not evidence that the heart isn't there. The armor is evidence that the heart got hurt somewhere and decided protection mattered more than expression. So when that armor cracks, even for a second, even for one text message sent from a place of real discomfort, what you are witnessing is not indifference, breaking through. It's love, finally louder than fear, if only for a moment. This sets up everything else we're going to talk about today. Because once you understand that their love speaks in undertone, not overtone, in fragments, not speeches, you'll start seeing it everywhere. In the small moments they let you in the way they come back, in the plans they slip in without meaning to. But it starts here. It starts with the moment they didn't have to reach out and did anyway. Remember this, the ones who love you the hardest to read are often loving you the hardest, period. Don't confuse quiet with absent. Sometimes quiet is just love, learning to speak again. Now let's move to the second sign, and this one is even more intimate than the first, because this one is about sight, about what they allow you to see. Think about what most of us do every single day with almost everyone in our lives. We curate. We manage the frame. We put on the version of ourselves that's put together, competent, attractive, in control, because somewhere we learned that being seen fully means being seen critically. So we perform, all of us do it to some degree. But the avoidant person has turned this into an art form because for them, being fully seen isn't just uncomfortable, it's historically been dangerous. Somewhere along the way, someone took what they revealed and used it against them, or worse, took it and left. So they built a curator, a gatekeeper, a very sophisticated internal editor whose entire job is to control what version of them reaches. Your eyes. So when that gatekeeper takes a day off, when they let you see them anxious, unshaven, snapping at nothing, sitting in silence with no explanation, looking like a person instead of a performance, I need you to understand what actually just happened. That is not carelessness. That is not them letting themselves go around you. That is one of the most sophisticated forms of trust a guarded person is capable of offering. Here's the psychological truth underneath it. Vulnerability for the avoidant isn't a sentence, it's a surrender. You and I might build intimacy through conversation, through sharing our feelings out loud. They build it through exposure, quiet, undramatic exposure. They're not going to sit you down and say, I trust you completely now. Instead, they're just going to stop hiding the mess. And that's the same sentence spoken in a different language. This connects directly to what we just talked about, the text message during hardship. Both are the same mechanism at work, an internal system built for protection, choosing in a small moment to lower its guard instead of raise it. The difference is that the first was an act of reaching out. This one is an act of letting you in. One is initiative, the other is permission. Both are rare currency from someone whose entire architecture is built around control and distance. And here's where I want to challenge you, because this is where people get it backwards. We're conditioned to be drawn to the polished version of someone, the version with the good, lighting, the right words, the composed face. But I want to suggest to you that the uncomposed version, the tired version, the version with nothing to prove, that is the more honest gift. Anyone can show you their highlight reel. It takes safety and it takes trust for someone to show you their outtakes. So the next time somebody who guards themselves fiercely lets you see them fall apart a little. Irritable, off, human, don't recoil from it. Don't mistake it for them pulling away. Recognize it for exactly what it is. The wall coming down brick by brick, not because they've stopped protecting themselves, but because they've started to believe that with you, they might not need to. Because in the end, anyone can love the version of you that's easy to love. The ones who let you see them at their worst and still stay in the room, they're not showing you weakness, they're showing you trust. And trust, once given by someone who rarely gives it, is the closest thing to love they know how to speak. Now, the third sign, and this is the one I think gets missed the most, because it's hiding in plain sight, disguised as something ordinary. It's this: they show love through action, not words. The car gets fixed. The coffee order gets remembered. They show up early before you even ask to help you move boxes up 3 flights of stairs in the middle of summer. And here's the mistake almost everybody makes when they encounter this. They discount it. They think that's not romance. That's just doing stuff. But I want to stop you right there because I think you've got the hierarchy backwards. Words are cheap. I don't say that to be cynical. I say it because it's true and it's freeing once you understand it. Words cost nothing to produce. Anyone can say I love you in the same tone they'd use to order a sandwich. But action requires something, words don't. It requires attention. It requires that someone was actually paying attention to your life closely enough to know your coffee order, to notice your car was making that sound, to know exactly what day you were moving. That's not effortless. That's surveillance of the heart. That's someone who has been quietly, carefully studying you, whether they'd ever admit that out loud or not. Now, why does the avoidant person default to action instead of language? Because language is exposure. The words, I love you, are a direct hit. No ambiguity, no plausible deniability, nothing to hide behind. If you say it and it's not received the way you hoped, you're standing there fully exposed, but fixing someone's car. If it goes unacknowledged, you can retreat behind, I was just being helpful. Action gives them an exit. It lets them love you with a security door still installed. And I want you to recognize that as strategy, not deficiency. It's a nervous system finding the safest possible route to the same destination, caring for you. Here's the deeper principle. And this is something I've taught for years in every arena of life, not just relationships. You find out what people value by watching where they spend their energy, not their vocabulary. Time is the only truly non-renewable resource any of us have. Nobody gives you their Saturday afternoon, their sleep, their gas money, their physical labor. For someone who means nothing to them, words can be generated in a half a second with zero cost. Actions cost something real. And when someone consistently pays that cost for you, that is your answer. That is the truth. Underneath whatever they're able or unable to say out loud, this connects directly back to everything else we've built today, the quiet text during hardship, the unguarded moment they let you witness. Notice the pattern. This is someone who has decided through behavior rather than declaration that you are worth the exposure, worth the energy, worth the risk. They're just handing you the proof and a currency you might not have been trained to read. So I want to leave you with this. Stop waiting for someone to narrate their love to you in perfect sentences and start reading the sentence they're already writing with their hands. Because the truest love letters were never written in ink. They're written in the things people do for you when they think you're not counting. Now we come to the fourth sign, and this is the one that trips people up more than any other, because on the surface, it looks like the opposite of love. It's this, they come back after pulling away. Let's be honest about what happens. There's a good stretch, closeness, warmth. Maybe even a few of those moments we already talked about, the unguarded moments, the quiet acts of care, and then without warning, the temperature drops. They go quiet, they get distant. Maybe they cancel plans. Maybe they just disappear into themselves for a few days. And every instinct in you screams that this is the end, that you've lost them, that the door is closing. I want to tell you something that took me years of studying human behavior to fully understand. The pullback is not the message, the return is the message. Anyone can create distance. That takes no skill at all. Silence is the easiest thing in the world to produce. What takes something real, what takes actual internal work, is coming back. Choosing after the retreat to re-enter the very space that made you retreat in the first place. Here's what's happening underneath the surface, and I want you to really absorb this. For the avoidant person, closeness doesn't register the way it does for you. When you get close to someone, your nervous system reads it as safety, as reward, as more please. But for someone wired avoidantly, closeness past a certain threshold gets misread by an ancient, overprotective part of the brain as danger. Not because you did anything wrong, not because the connection isn't real, but because deep intimacy, historically, in their personal story, has been the thing that preceded loss or pain. So the nervous system does what nervous systems do. It pulls the alarm and they retreat, not from you, but from the intensity of what they're feeling for you. This is the part people get backwards. They think the withdrawal is evidence the feelings weren't real. I'm telling you, it's often the opposite. The withdrawal is frequently proportional to how real the feelings are. The bigger the retreat, the bigger the thing they were running from inside themselves. So then the return, that's the data point that matters. That's them on their own, without you begging or chasing, deciding that whatever they felt during that closeness is worth the risk of feeling it again. That is not weakness. That is a person doing quiet, invisible battle with their own wiring and choosing you. Again, on the other side of it. This ties directly into everything we've built today. The quiet text during hardship, the unguarded moment, the action instead of the words. Every single one of those is the same person, using the tools available to them to tell you something their mouth hasn't caught up to yet. The return after distance is simply the boldest version of that same signal. I left, and I chose to come back anyway. I'm not telling you to accept a relationship that's all retreat and no return. That's not love. That's just abandonment on a loop, and you deserve better than a pattern that never resolves. I'm telling you, when the retreat is followed again and again by a genuine return, read that correctly, that's not almost love, that is love. Doing the hardest thing love ever has to do, walking back through the very fear it just ran from, just to stand in front of you again. Now, the fifth sign, and I want you to listen for this one carefully because it almost never announces itself. It slips out sideways in a sentence that wasn't rehearsed. It's this: they include you in future plans. Here's the thing you need to understand about avoidant attachment and time. The present moment is manageable. The present moment can be controlled, exited, reframed if it gets too intense. But the future is commitment's home address. The future is where promises live, where expectations get built, where a person can be disappointed by you in ways that feel permanent. So for someone whose whole system is organized around avoiding entrapment, talking about us in the future tense is about as close to psychological exposure as it gets. It's scarier in some ways than saying I love you, because I love you describes a feeling in this moment. Let's do this next spring describes an expectation that they're going to still be standing there, still choosing you months from now. So when it happens, when they mention a trip next summer and just assume you're in it, when they say when we get a place with a yard instead of if, when they introduce you to family the way you introduce someone who's already part of the architecture of your life. I need you to notice that this almost never comes as an announcement. It comes as a slip. It comes out sideways, mid-sentence, often followed by a flicker of surprise on their own face, like even they didn't fully authorize that sentence to leave their mouth. And that right there is exactly why you should trust it. The words we rehearse are the words we've calculated. The words that slip out are the words that are true. Anybody can plan a grand declaration. It's much harder to fake an unconscious assumption about your own future. When someone's mind has already filed you under permanent without their conscious permission, that's not performance. That's the deepest part of them. The part underneath the armor, quietly rearranging its own blueprint to make room for you. This is the culmination of everything we've talked about today. And I want you to see the architecture of it, the quiet check-in during hardship that was them reaching toward you. The unguarded moment, that was them letting you in. The action instead of words, that was them proving it without saying it. The return after distance, that was them choosing you again on purpose. And this, the future slipping into their language unbidden, is the final proof. Somewhere along the way, without a ceremony, without a big conversation, you stopped being a variable in their life and became a constant. I'll tell you something I believe deeply. People don't plan futures with things they intend to lose. Nobody mentally reserves a seat on a trip a year from now for someone they expect to be gone by. Christmas. If you're living in someone's spoken aloud future, even in fragments, even by accident, you're not a guest in their life. You have quietly become one of its permanent fixtures. So don't wait for the grand declaration. Listen for the accident. Listen for the sentence that slipped. Because sometimes the truest I'm not going anywhere a guarded heart can offer isn't spoken on purpose at all. It just falls out because some part of them already knows it's true. Now we arrive at the sixth sign, and I've saved this one for last on purpose because it's the deepest layer of all of them. It's this: they get vulnerable in indirect ways, not through confession, through confession's shadow, the joke that's a little too honest. The childhood story told in passing, the offhand line about missing you that gets delivered like it's nothing, and then quickly buried under a change of subject. Here's what you need to understand about direct vulnerability, the kind we're all taught to expect. The sit-down conversation, the eye contact, the I need to tell you something important. For most people, that's hard but survivable. For an avoidant person, that format itself is the threat. Direct vulnerability requires you to hold still in full view while the truth lands. There's no exit ramp. There's no plausible deniability. And a nervous system trained for 30 years to treat exposure as danger is not going to walk calmly through that door, no matter how much the heart behind it wants to. So what happens instead? The truth finds a side door. It comes out disguised as humor. Yeah, my dad was never around. Classic story. Anyway, delivered with a laugh, moving fast, like if they slow down, the truth might catch up and hurt them. It comes out as a story about being 9 years old, told with strange, unprompted detail, like they'd been carrying it and it finally found a crack to leak through. It comes out as I missed you, said flatly, almost accidentally, in the middle of a sentence about something else entirely, and then immediately covered with a joke or a subject change as if they could take it back by moving fast enough. I want you to recognize what's actually happening in that moment because it's profound. That is someone handing you their most protected material through the only door they found that doesn't set off every alarm in their body. It's not a lesser form of vulnerability. In some ways, it's a more honest one because it isn't curated for effect. Nobody rehearses a truth they're trying to hide even from themselves. It just escapes. And this is where all 6 signs finally converge into one single idea. Every single thing we've talked about today, the quiet reach during hardship, the unguarded moment, the action instead of the declaration, the return after distance, the future slipping into their words, every one of them is this same phenomenon, wearing a different disguise. It's love trying to get to you, using every route except the one that feels like standing fully. Exposed in the open. The avoidant heart is not closed, it is heavily encrypted, and your job, if you choose to accept it, is not to demand they hand you the plain text. Your job is to learn to read the code. Because here's the truth, I want you to leave this room carrying, love doesn't only live in the words someone is brave enough to say, sometimes it lives in everything they do instead of saying them. The check-in, the mess they let you see, the coffee they remembered, the return after retreat, the future they slipped into, the truth that escaped sideways. That is a person in the only language fear has left them, telling you the one thing they cannot yet say straight to your face. They love you. They've been telling you the whole time. The only question left is, were you listening in a language you understood? We've covered a lot of ground today, but I want you to step back for a second and see the whole shape of what we've actually built because it's bigger than 6 points on a list. It's a single truth viewed from 6 different angles. The quiet text during hardship, the unguarded, uncurated moment, the action instead of the declaration, the return after the retreat, the future that slipped into their words by accident, the truth that escaped sideways disguised as a joke or a story. 6 signs, but one signal. Underneath every single one of them is the same person doing the same thing. Loving you in the only dialect fear ever taught them to speak. And here's what I need you to take with you when you leave this room. For most of your life, somebody probably handed you a definition of love that came preloaded with a script, the declarations, the grand gestures, the words said at the right time in the right tone, and that script isn't wrong, but it isn't the only script, it's just the loudest one. It's the one that gets made into movies. And because it's the loudest, we've trained an entire generation of people to walk right past. Quieter, truer forms of love because they didn't arrive in familiar packaging. I want to challenge something deeper than a relationship pattern today. I want to challenge the way you measure truth itself. Because if you only recognize love when it's fluent, confident, and fully spoken, you will miss some of the realest love you're ever offered in this life. Real love doesn't always arrive articulate. Sometimes it arrives limping. Sometimes it arrives in fragments, running on a nervous system, doing its absolute best with wiring. It didn't choose and didn't ask for. And the question is never really, do they love me enough to say it perfectly? The question is, can you recognize love when it's brave but not yet fluent? Now, I want to leave you with one responsibility, because everything I teach has to come back to responsibility or it's just entertainment. This is not permission to stay in something that only ever retreats and never returns, that only ever hides and never once lets you in. Pattern matters, growth matters. You deserve reciprocity, not a permanent translation project. But for the ones who are trying, who reach out even briefly, who let their guard slip even for a moment, who show up in action, who come back after the fear wins for a day, who slip you into a future they didn't mean to reveal, who let a truth escape sideways because it couldn't find the front door. For those people, I want you to have new eyes today, because somewhere in your life right now, there might be someone loving you exactly this way, quietly, imperfectly, bravely, in their own broken code. And the tragedy isn't that they can't say it. The tragedy would be that they finally did in the only language they had, and you were standing there waiting for a different one. Don't wait for the words, learn the language. Because love was never only found in what people say to you. It's found in everything they risk to stay standing next to you.